Hi, and welcome to Getting Biblical, the show where I drink too much and talk about my favorite Bible stories. I am Matt Smith, your host, and thank you for joining us today. So, a couple weeks back, we talked about the story of Moses and how he and God used the plagues to convince the Pharaoh and the Egyptians to let the Israelites go, to release them from slavery, and everything that happened, the 10 plagues and all that kind of stuff. For today's episode, I wanted to jump into those plagues a little bit deeper. So this won't be a normal episode, as if anything I do is normal, but it's going to be a biblical theory episode because there is a lot here. There is a ton of stuff about the plagues and the Israelites leaving Egypt and everything, and I think it's just so fascinating. And it's one of the biggest stories of the Bible. I mean, obviously it's relevant in Judaism, with Passover and everything, but even in Christianity it's talked about, and it's just one of the top 5 probably biggest stories in the Bible. And there's just a lot of content, a lot of layers, and a lot of awesome stuff to go over. So I just wanted to take this episode to kind of dig deeper into some of the more fun aspects of all that. So that's what we're going to do today. But before all that, as always, let's talk about what I am drinking. So for today's episode, because we're doing a little bit of a mix match, a hodgepodge of different just theories and facts and stuff and deeper information, I decided that not to worry too much about trying to find a particular alcohol, a particular brand or bottle or anything that magically lined up with today's episode. So instead, I just decided to use what I already had. And a few weeks ago, I do a lot of research online about the world of alcohol, whiskey in general, but other things, and always looking for new articles and new stories and new interesting things, new releases, that type of stuff. And I'm a part of a few different Facebook groups for for alcohol enthusiasts, whiskey tribes and stuff. I had caught wind of one that's kind of in the vein that we've been doing with some of the budget booze, the Aldi's wine, the Sam's Club, Members Mark, Scotch, that type of thing. And so for today's episode, I'm going to delve into what I caught wind of was that Costco brand, Costco warehouses or whatever stores, their in-house brand is Kirkland Signature, and they have actually an amazing selection of value products, value alcohol. They've got vodka, they've got rum, they've got several different scotches, different Irish whiskeys, Canadian whiskeys. They've got all kinds of stuff. So I'd been reading a lot of these reviews about the Kirkland Signature brands, and decided that I needed to try it for myself. I got kind of all excited about it after reading some stuff, and I like finding the value brands and everything. So I looked online and found a Costco about an hour away from my house or so, and now I don't have a membership to Costco because, of course, I don't. They're an hour away from the house, right? Why would I? But I do have a membership to Sam's Club, and I've talked about that before. And so the way that my state works is that Sam's can't sell alcohol, hard liquor. They can do beer and wine, but hard liquor can't be sold in the regular store. It's a separate store, separate entrance, on the premises there. And whenever I go and buy alcohol from Sam's Club, they don't require me to show my membership card. So I read online that in some states, these warehouse, membership warehouse stores aren't allowed to sell alcohol behind the membership. So they can sell it, but it has to be outside their store, and it has to be available to the public. Basically, anybody can come in and get it. So I read that online. Some guy on Yahoo Answers or whatever gave me the reading his breakdown of it all, and I was like, okay, cool. So I can drive the hour to Costco and pick up a few bottles, and everything will be fine. So I had a birthday coming up down there, and I was like, I'll leave early. I'll give myself an extra hour or whatever to go to Costco. So I go down there, and the first thing I grabbed was these are all handles, right? These are all the 1.75 liters, so the big bottle. big bottle of just blended Scotch whiskey, no age statement. So right, so it's kind of minimum. It was like $20 so for a handle of it. So that was the first thing, and after that was also a big bottle of 12-year-old Scotch for a little bit more money. I think it was about 30, but a big bottle of it or whatever for 12 years. 12-year-old product was amazing. So grab that. Also, they had a big bottle of rum that was like for $13 that interested me. So I grabbed that, take it all over to the counter, and start talking to the cashier. And she's like, "Oh, like, have you ever had these before?" And gave me a little anecdote about how the rum she had it at one of her parties, and apparently it's very, very comparable to like Sailor Jerry's. And she had some people over who thought they were tough shit and kept drinking it, but didn't realize that the Costco brand one has a higher ABV than Sailor Jerry's, so it'll fuck you up quicker than the regular stuff. And she had a couple people that got laid out because they didn't respect it enough. So that right there sold me. So I'm like, okay, great, good decision on this. I'm definitely buying that. And then I told her about the show a little bit. And she's like, "Oh, you gotta get our vodka." So she walked me over to that part of the store. We grabbed the vodka and pulled it back. She's like, "Oh, it's just like Grey Goose, but it's like half the price and everything." So now I've got like about $100 worth of booze here on the counter, and getting ready to purchase it. And I'm on cloud nine. I'm excited and like can't wait to to bring it all home and try it all and talk about it and everything. So I'm like, this is going great. So the next thing she says, and she was super nice. Next thing she goes is like, "Okay, I just need your membership card so that I can ring you up." And I'm like, "What? Excuse me?" And she's like, "I can't help you unless you're a member." I'm like, "Oh, I read online that here in our state you couldn't sell liquor behind a membership, and that I didn't need one." And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about." And I'm like, but I have a membership to Sam's, and they don't ever look at my card, and they don't care when I buy liquor from them. And she very politely said, "I don't care what Sam's does. That's not a thing. I can't help you." And nicely was like, "You need to leave if you don't have a membership card." So apparently, while what I said originally was true, that some states have that, like, you can't sell liquor behind the membership or whatever, my state is not one of those. So it just happens to be that Sam's does it that way. So there I was, out of luck, all these bottles on the counter, getting ready to purchase it, can't do it. And she says, "Listen, I could get fired. I'm not supposed to do this. But if you come back, I'm gonna leave this on the counter for a minute. If you come back with your long lost friend who is just late on arrival, who will come in and scan their membership card, I will let you purchase it." Like, wink, wink, right? And I was like, "Oh yeah, my friend is in the parking lot right now." And so I ran out in the parking lot and started talking to like I think it was like 5 different people, trying to like, "Hey, are you coming in to buy booze or whatever?" Like, trying to make a friend on the spot, trying to get someone to come in and help me I felt like a 17-year-old again who wasn't allowed to purchase alcohol and was trying to get someone older than me to go in and buy a case of shit beer. But so eventually, like, the 5th person I talked to was coming into the store. He was a little bit bewildered about what I was doing. But he ended up being a nice guy. Luckily I was dressed nice. Like, I was going to the birthday party, so I didn't look like just some like bum or whatever. So some mooch or whatever. Like, I was like, "Here's the situation. I just need to borrow your membership real quick. It won't cost you a penny." And anyway, he was a nice guy. We went back in. I go, "Hey, here's my long lost friend. I found him in the parking lot." And so we purchased in the store. We purchased the booze, and so that's what I'm drinking today. That's what I have today. I've got the 2 different scotches that I bought that day at Costco, and this might be it for me. I don't know if I'll be able to pull off that feat again with making a friend on the spot in the parking lot, unless I want to commit to an actual membership for a store that's an hour away from my house. But so we might get a one-time only deal of having these in my home bar. But so I have, again, the no age statement scotch, and then the 12-year-old scotch. The no age statement, it's pretty great. I mean, it's $20 for a handle. It's comparable to the Members Mark that we had earlier. I put it in line with the Red Label, Johnny Walker Red Label, right? It's just, you can tell it's a blended. You can tell it's young. It's not really round it out. There's not a whole lot of like deep flavors there or anything, but it's solid. It's good. There's no reason for me to drive an hour to buy the Costco one when I can buy other stuff here locally, if you get what I'm saying. But definitely very cool. The 12-year-old one, though, for just a little bit more than the other one, is absolutely where to go. It's worth the extra money to get the 12-year one. I think it's great. I think it's fine. It's up there. Maybe not quite as great as Johnny Walker Black, right? But it's still it's I don't know. I was very happy with the bottle. 10 out of 10 would definitely buy this again because it is cheaper, right? It is, it's that same type of quality, that you would expect. It's not going to blow you away. It's not a Lagavulin. It's not, any of those, Lefroy or whatever. It's not like super peaty or anything like that. But it's for the price, it's quality. So those are what I'm drinking today. Just kind of, mixing and matching, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. These two things that I had to embarrass myself in order to be able to purchase. So, but highly recommend it if you're ever around or if you're ever in there. Don't ever be afraid of the Costco home brand Kirkland signatures. Great stuff, great value, great price. So, all that being said, let's go ahead and get to the drinking. Ah, that's great. It's really it's so like it's mild and easy to drink. And that's what I'm drinking today. So, let's get back to Bible stuff. So the first thing, before we even get into the plagues, I want to talk about the whole walking stick turning into a snake bit. So here's what's neat. If you'll remember, it happened once in front of the burning bush with God and Moses and everything. And then again, it happened when, that was the sample run, right? The test run. And then again, Moses and Aaron did it in front of Pharaoh while talking to Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh's wizards came out and they all did the same. You didn't. That's not very impressive. We can also turn sticks into snakes or whatever. And then they had that whole thing. Right? So, but here's what's cool. If you look at the Hebrew word, the original text for it, the original word in the part with the burning bush, the sentence is like, and Moses threw down his staff and it became and then the word there in that blank is the Hebrew word for basically a snake. It's what, it appears multiple times in the Bible, all referencing an obvious snake. No big deal, right? That's very clear. However, when they see Pharaoh and they do it that time, and the passage is like, and Aaron threw down his staff, and it became a blank, right? What word would go in there? You would think it would be the same word that was in the previous, verse, right? The same setup. You think it would just say snake again, but it doesn't. And this time, the second time, it doesn't use that same word. It doesn't use the regular word for snake. It uses a different word. The word it uses is tannin, which, and don't take this for gospel, but in my research, most of the time that this Hebrew word, tannin, is used in the Bible, it is in reference to either some sort of sea creature or even sometimes a dragon of some sort. At the very least, like a crocodile. So, but there's more references that I think to actual dragons, right? That's like the most popular times that it uses this very specific Hebrew word, and so it makes this whole story, this whole part have a whole different imagination to it, a whole different representation. So just imagine the scenario, right? Moses and Aaron, and they're there, and they're with Pharaoh and his magicians and all that, and the wizards, and Moses is like, hey, you're being a real dick and owning slaves. That's not cool, bro, and we don't like it at all. Damn it. And Pharaoh's like, what are you gonna do about it, nerd? You can't. I'm not giving up my slaves. And then Aaron would be like, this is what we're going to do about it. And he throws down his staff, and it shapeshifts into a freaking dragon, right there in the meeting room with the Pharaoh. How amazing would that be? That would be so cool. And then the Pharaoh's wizards, they throw theirs down also, and they also become dragons or whatever. And it's just like one big 1 versus 10 dragon fight right there in the chambers. like that would be amazing. And then Aaron's dragon wins the fight, kills all the other dragons and eats them, which is that's what it says. His staff or whatever swallows up the other ones. Like how that would the Old Testament Pokemon battle, that would have been amazing. So I don't know. I wish I wish we knew for a fact. And even if it wasn't, even if it was just crocodiles or something, it's still cooler than snakes. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to I can't even turn a stick into a snake, right? So I don't like I don't know why I'm being judgmental. Like that's pretty badass by itself, but it's just more badass if you think of it like dragons and or at least crocodiles or whatever. So anyway, also while we're talking about semantics, and this is just kind of curious, I think it's just poetic really, but yeah, in the verse where it talks about the tannin or the dragon as it were, it says Aaron's rod swallowed up the other magicians' rods. And it doesn't say the word tannin or dragon or snake or whatever. It says rod. And there's some people out there, a slight few, that think that like they threw down the sticks, it became a dragon or an alligator or whatever, crocodile, whatever, or snake or whatever. Like it did its thing. But then they reverted back to being a stick. And then in stick form ends up eating the other sticks. And while that's not as cool as a Pokemon dragon fight or whatever, it's also even more weird. Like I've never seen a tree eat another tree or a piece of wood eat another piece of wood. So maybe that would be like more impressive. I don't know. I much more believe that it's poetic when it says his rod swallowed up the other rods. Like that that's just I don't know. That's how I see it. You can choose to believe it whatever you want. Whatever you want to do. But I think it's very cool and neat. Going back to the word tannin. That it chose to use a different story there. So that's the one thing, right? Well, first theory. Okay, so moving on. Let's have some fun with plagues. Why the plagues? Why these plagues? Like, yeah, it's pretty friggin' metal to turn water into blood and smite people with boils and all that, but is there more to it? Were these just random like happenstance, whatever, like things, or was there a rhyme and reason? And in a word, yes, there was a specific reason. At least I believe so. At the end of Exodus 12:12, God says he's going to come down and against all the gods of Egypt, lowercase g, against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgments. I am God. And I think that like there's an idea, a theory that each one of the plagues was specifically pointed towards one of the Egyptian gods or their beliefs, right? Something in their religion and their culture that God wanted to attack and show that he was more powerful than they were, or what their beliefs were, or the gods that they believed in or whatever. God was laying a beat down specific like systematically going through, from 1 to 10, going through all of their gods and their beliefs. So let's talk about ancient Egyptian religion for a second to set the foundation. So it's a little bit difficult to get a full, clear picture of what ancient Egyptian gods and religion and whatever, what the whole picture was 100%, because back then there were these little pockets of Egyptian cities, and some of them had slightly different views that over time, when they came together, would merge and kind of muddle the waters of exactly what they believed, right? So, like, we didn't have the internet back then or whatever, like, so it was kind of like, oh, like you guys over here switched it up and believed in this one god in particular, and like that was a god of fertility or god of this or whatever, and then over here this one would believe in someone else very similar, and then later over time those like just cultures and then through history or whatever, like these groups would come together and like kind of like, oh, well, like our god does this and your god does that, let's merge them. Like it'd be imagine if it was like imagine you lived in a city that believed in the legend of the Batman, right? A genius billionaire who through a traumatic event committed his life to justice and protecting people while building gadgets to help him in his crusade of justice, right? But then, over here was another city who they had a legend of the Iron Man, who was a genius billionaire who through a traumatic event committed his life to justice and protecting people while building gadgets to help him in his crusade, right? And then over centuries, the cities would talk to each other and they'd intermarry or this or that or whatever, and realize that they had very similar beliefs. Like, wow, we have a lot of there's a lot of commonality here. very interesting. And these people would group up over years or whatever, and then like 3,000 years in the future, we find an old like Reddit thread on a stone tablet or something that says like, oh, like we piece it all together, like they worshipped a god named the Iron Bat, who was a genius billionaire who had a traumatic event and whatever, and then invented a super advanced suit that let him fly and shoot laser beams, but also dressed up like a bat. Like that, like very similar stories, and let's just merge them together. So kind of like a silly analogy, but it's actually like literally what happened. For instance, like the biggest, like the number one god in ancient Egyptian religion was the god Ra. He was the sun god, right? He literally wears the sun on his head like a hat, and every day rides around in his horse and chariot around the earth, and as they pull him in this huge circle around the earth, that's how we get the sunrise and sunset every day, because it's on his head, who's being like carried around the globe, right? That's the belief. But then there was this other god, Amon, who was originally, one of the patron deities. He was the god of the wind, and along with his wife was like the god of creation. They're the ones that put everything together, that created everything. And then later, over time, we see evidence of ancient Egyptians worshiping Amon-Ra, who was the god of sun and creation, right? So they merged the two together, like in Dragon Ball, where you do the fusion dance or whatever. Like Amon and Ra became Amon-Ra. And that's it. That you can research that. That's the thing that happened. They just merged the two. And so because of all this, it's really hard to pinpoint a 100% 1-to-1 ratio of which plague was attacking which god at this time. But I've done a lot of research on it, and I'm not, a super expert historian, but putting things together and doing my own research, I think I have a kind of an idea of where to start, or at least a fun theory on it. So before we can get into that, I want to lay out a few key players. If you're not super familiar with ancient Egyptian deities. So, okay. So the first family of Egyptian gods consisted of Osiris, Isis, and Set, right? And the brother and sisters. And Osiris, like he's a pretty cool dude. He's usually depicted as just like a regular guy, but he's got green skin, right? He's got a green skin tone, and we're gonna get back to that in a second. But Osiris, he's okay, like he's nice. And then Isis was Osiris's sister, but they also got married, right? It was like we're not worrying about it, like it was slim pickings, I guess, as far as marrying other gods back then at this point of civilization and whatever. So they get married or whatever. And Isis is like thought of as the goddess of healing and just a very maternal figure of the lore and everything. And but she's always just depicted as just a woman. Okay. And then after that we have Horus, and Horus is Osiris's and Isis's son. But I'm going to get to that story in a minute. But Horus is one of those guys that has a falcon for a head, if you've seen him. But not Ra. Ra also has a falcon for a head. But Ra is the falcon head with the sun on top, and Horus doesn't have the sun on top. So that's how you can tell them apart. If you're ever looking at ancient Egyptian, whatever, like tablets or anything, that's how you can tell them apart. And then there's Anubis. Anubis was kind of like the gravekeeper god, and he helped people get embalmed and like carry on to the afterlife and all that. He's the guy with the dog for a head, right? Like the Doberman Pinscher. And Anubis is interesting because he actually kind of does the least of all the gods as far as wild stories go. But yet he's depicted on like so many like you see like him with the the dog head or whatever, like on so much of their art and whatever. So he's super popular, but he didn't do a whole lot. Like he just like he's a good guy. He puts his head down, he just goes to work. He works very hard helping people get to the afterlife, but didn't do a lot of wild stories. He's kind of cool. Then there's Set. Now, Set is the bad guy. He's a dick. And I'm going to get into a story about him in a second. But, so he's Osiris and Isis's brother. And he's depicted, it's weird. His main look, like when they carve pictures of him, is a mystery. Because unlike the rest of everyone else, who are just people or animal heads, normal animal heads that we can figure out, his animal head is not clear. It's kind of looks like a dog, but he's got like weird like bunny ears also, and he's got like this like long nose and then weird bunny ears that stick straight up, and we're not kind of looks a little bit like, I don't even know, like maybe kind of like an anteater, but also with big ears. Like we don't know. Like there's not an animal that he's a 1-1 mix. So we think that maybe he's just like a weird looking deformed dog, or a lot of people just think he's actually, because he's kind of like the god of chaos and things. So they think that his depiction is actually a combination of several different animals, and that he's just wild like that. So, but that's what he looks like. So anyway, so that's kind of like the baseline of the different ones. So, okay, so first story, a little bit just to tell you what happened. So Osiris was the oldest and apparently was made king, right? Just that's how it goes. And he's married to his sister, Isis, and everything. And they're pretty new into the marriage, I guess. And they haven't even had kids yet or anything like that. But Set was super jealous of his brother, and he wanted the throne for himself, of course. And so one day he murders his brother Osiris and chops him up in a bunch of pieces so he can be king. And then Isis is like, you dick, like how dare you cut up my husband? We haven't even have kids yet. So she goes and gets Anubis, the dog guy, and to help her wrap up Osiris's chopped up body parts, and they bandage him all together and everything, and they do some magic, and they bring him back to life. And then, right as soon as he comes back to life, she sleeps with him, has sex with him, and he gets her pregnant. And that apparently worked just swimmingly. Like, okay, like I don't know, like raise you back from the dead, and like text, like, you awake? Like what's going on? Like immediate booty call as soon as he comes back from the dead. She gets pregnant, and that's how they get Horus. Okay, that we talked about. But Osiris stays undead. That's why he's got the green skin color in all of his depictions. So he's the undead god, and he actually kind of controls, like, is Lord of the Underworld a little bit and all that kind of stuff. So that's his now fate. But there's this big long rivalry between Horus. So now Horus is his son and the rightful heir to the throne or whatever to be the king. And so that bumps Set back down off the throne. And so Horus and Set are like at each other's throats all the fucking time. They don't like each other, right? Of course, I mean, Set killed his dad, right? Like there's a reason for Horus not to like him, and then Set's just a dick. But anyway, there's a bunch of stories of them going at it. Here is the wildest one. This one's crazy, and I think I have to say this. Like, this is probably going to be the most not safe for work bits that we've ever done on the show. Like, trigger warning, whatever, just FYI. I don't know. Like, if you thought stuff in the Bible was sometimes like risque or bad or whatever, I don't know. Like, this I think personally this takes the cake. But anyway, well, I'll let you be the judge. So okay, so there are some underlying weird homoerotic tones for Set and Horus. Apparently, Horus had a super high like sexual drive. I just wanted to like have sex with everything and anything that he could. And along with that, there's stories of him, and these are literally like these aren't just stories some sicko made up on 4chan or whatever. Like, these are stories that we've gleaned from writings found on papyrus, like from like 5,000 years ago. So just saying, like, these are I'm not making this up. So the homoerotic undertones persist for Set, and again, one of his characteristics is he's just got this rampant sexual appetite and doesn't give a shit, and he's a massive jerk, which doesn't. That's a bad mix, right? And so in one of his earliest stories, Set, right, the bad guy, begs Horus to have sex with him. Horus agrees to have sex with his uncle if Set gives Horus some of his magical powers in exchange, which I guess seems like a fair trade, I guess, right? I don't know. But the problem is that in ancient Egyptian ideology, semen is actually like super toxic, they believed. So like it's poisonous. You either like make a kid with it, right? You're bringing forth new life into the world, which is okay. But if not, you die. Like it's kind of like, I don't know. Like, I guess they never swallowed. I don't know. Like, whatever. But sex was high stakes, apparently. So So there's this high risk, high reward issue going on, but they agree to it. And then Set, has sex with his nephew Horus, but his jizz makes Horus gravely ill. And because of all that, Horus doesn't get the powers, or in addition to that, I don't know, Horus doesn't get the powers from his uncle that he was promised. So, right, it was just like all bad, like wow, it's wild. I don't even know, man. But like, so Horus's mother, Isis, she's all mad on behalf of her son or whatever. So she hatches a plan, and like, so one day Isis gets some of her son Horus's own jizz, and like, I don't know how, I don't know what, like I don't know, but I don't need to know. But she gets some of it, and she makes lettuce wraps with it, I guess, and like puts it in there as a secret ingredient, and then serves it to Set, and like, hey, like I have these extra lettuce wraps. Do you want one? And so Set's like, fuck yeah, like I love lettuce wraps, and he just like gobbles them up or whatever, and then after he was all done, she's like, surprise, like the lettuce wraps actually had Horus's semen in it. And Set is all like, no. And then, but then after he eats it, weirdly, after ingesting it, after swallowing the semen, it impregnates Set. And so now he's pregnant from his nephew's jizz from the lettuce wrap. But it doesn't make a quote unquote baby. But when he gives birth or whatever happens, it's weird. It actually pops out like a large golden disc on Set's forehead, as kind of like every time anyone sees them, they're gonna be like, "Hey, that came from him." Eating the secret ingredient lettuce wraps. Like, super fun stuff, guys. Like, it's a wild story, man. It's just, anyway. So that's just a little bit of a recap of some of the mythos of the Egyptian gods or whatever. That was the wildest one that I could find, so I had to share it. But anyway, so now you know kind of who they are, who the players are, what their deal is. Now let's see how the plagues of Moses tie in with these gods. So to review the plagues, we have number 1, we've got water turned to blood. 2 is frogs. 3 is lice. 4 in English, well, I'll get to that in a second, is in the English version of the Bible, it's flies. 5 is cattle disease. 6 is boils. 7 is hail. 8 is locusts. 9 is darkness. And 10 is death of the firstborn. Okay? And now let's get into number 4 a little bit. So I didn't go into this when I was actually telling the story, just because it added extra time to the story that I was trying to not do. But I think this is cool. So in just about any English language Bible you pick up, it's going to say swarms of flies, right? Mosquitoes or whatever. But in the actual Hebrew, in the original, it doesn't say flies. It more closer just says like swarms, right? You can contextually maybe think like, oh, swarms of flies, right? Like finish the sentence, like, oh, they were plagued with swarms, ... like, so I get where people put that in, but it doesn't say that. And to get even more technical, the original Hebrew word was a rav, which means a mixture. So swarms of a mixture, which is a weird. So maybe it's still a mixture of bugs, but a mixture of what? In Judaism, it is debated and often believed that the 4th plague was actually not bugs, but wild beasts attacking people, like wolves or bears or something like that. Maybe wild hogs, wildebeests, rabid camels. I don't know, but I guess we could think of like what animals would be native to Egypt at that time. Crocodiles, snakes, hippos, jackals. Lions and leopards are actually also listed or shown on a bunch of art, so they clearly knew what lions and leopards were, even though I don't personally usually think about them being popular in ancient Egypt, but maybe they were around. I don't know. But can you imagine how terrifying that would be, like the 4th plague, to have like just crocodiles and hippos and jackals and lions and whatever just running through Egypt? And the verse even says like they came into people's homes and like you want to wake up in the middle of the night and there's a crocodile in your bedroom, like that's terrifying, right? That would be nuts. It's just like the fourth plague is like God just comes down like, let my people go, and Pharaoh's like, no, and God's like, all right, we're gonna get Jumanji up in here, and just hippos and monkeys running through everything, and I don't know. So in the Hebrew, technically the verse says, it was swarms of a mixture, like I said. Maybe it was insects, maybe it was a wild beast. We're not sure, and maybe we get even crazier with it. Maybe the fourth plague was like man/wild beast mixture. I don't know. The werewolves of Egypt. That's definitely a video. Or that's definitely a movie that I would watch, like a straight to DVD sci-fi movie. That I would, the werewolves of Egypt. I would definitely watch that movie. But there's no actual scriptural reference for that. Just to be clear. But even if I don't know, my brain goes wild. So like, what if it also like a mixture? I just think of Jeff Goldblum's 1986 sci-fi thriller, The Fly. Like, you should Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about. Like, straight up, Cronenberg stuff, and like because when he goes into the teleporter or whatever thing, like he mixes it with a fly. So one of them's like half Jeff Goldblum, half a fly. The other one's half a fly, half Jeff Goldblum. Then maybe that's the fourth plague. The fourth plague is just Jeff Goldblum flies all around Pharaoh. I mean, that would probably get me to like. Like, okay, take the Israelites, get them out of here. You're free from slavery. Just get rid of the Jeff Goldblum flies running around here. So that's just stupid. That's not it. But the wild beast is pretty much like standard belief in Judaism and in Passover and stuff like that. So from here on out, we're going to switch gears and say that the fourth plague is wild beast. We've got, again, water turning into blood, frogs, lice, wild beasts, cattle disease, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and death of the firstborn. So, first one, water turning into blood, could be attacking this guy called Khnum, the creator of water and life, or there's other god, Happy, who was the Nile god, which they worship. Happy is Hapi, by the way. Maybe it's Happy? I don't know. But he was the Nile god that they worshiped. Or possibly even Osiris himself, right? The green guy, the undead guy that I was talking about. Even though, there's this legend or whatever, this lore that the Nile is like part of his bloodstream or something like that. Like it's part of what helps guide spirits or whatever to the afterworld or something like that. So turning the water into blood could be attacking any of those gods from the Egyptian belief system. So you take your pick on that one. There's many to choose from. Secondly, frogs. So there was this goddess, Heket, who was the god of fertility and life. And she was literally depicted as a woman from the neck down, but with a frog's face for a head. And like, not to get too into it or whatever, but like if you remember way back when Moses was a baby and they were throwing male Israelite infants into the Nile to drown them. So this would be an extra like level of, one, you just turned the Nile into blood because you were murdering babies in it. But then two, with Heket, who is this fertility goddess, and she had the frog's face. Now you're attacking kind of like their own fertility goddess, and with frogs, and commanding the frogs to do stuff. So I think that's pretty cool, pretty clear. Third is lice, and this is probably a diss on the god Jeb, who was actually Osiris's dad. He was one of the oldest gods, and he was the god of earth itself, earth, dirt, dust, all this type of stuff. And if you remember from the lice plague, when Moses and Aaron, they struck the ground with their staff to create the lice from the dust. So this was a very personal attack on Jeb, who created the earth or whatever, I guess. Then there was also the god Khepri, who was the god of rebirth and renewing and seasons and all that kind of stuff. But that guy, Khepri, he actually had the body of a man and a literal head of a fly. So back to Jeff Goldblum, that's what he was. So the plague of lice could be attacking either or both of those guys. So now, wild beast. So as you know, a lot of the Egyptian gods have animal heads. We talked about that. With all that, the ancient Egyptians commonly deified animals. And ones I haven't mentioned yet are also like hippos, crocodiles, baboons, etc. So they deified all these animals and like kind of worshipped them or whatever. So having wild beasts roam through Egypt could very well be like a catch-all for all these different all these different things that they worship. So not any one god in particular, but just a broad spectrum attack on all of them. Alternatively, if we get a little bit deeper, there's this idea that, remember how I said Set was depicted as being a combination of, his face was a combination of different animals, like anteater with the bunny ears or whatever. He's kind of a mix and match. The fact that the fourth plague was a swarms of mixtures, like we could, we could say that maybe this was an attack on him. I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit like, it's fun to think about that, but that's like layers, right? You gotta kind of bend over backwards for that one a little bit. So it's a neat thought, but I'm not sure about that one. Next, we have cattle disease. So Hathor was the goddess of love and fertility and was depicted as a woman with the head of a cow. And also, cows themselves were worshipped in ancient Egypt. So this one might have been a 2-for-1 because, God was like, you shouldn't be worshiping cows, so we're going to do cattle disease. And also, screw off Hathor, like cowhead over there. It was a 2-for-1 attack. Then we have boils. So boils, this one, there's no god of open wounds or anything that I could find, but there is a god of healing and medicine and Sekhmet, and to inflict people with boils that wouldn't heal, right? That could be a specific diss on Sekhmet. So that's one I found for him. And then hail. So this possibly could have been from also against the god Set, who, it was the dick that we talked about. But he was the god of chaos, the god of the desert, and god of storms, apparently. So God was like, oh, you want to be the god of storms? I'm going to show you a storm. And that's when he sent the hail. And then next we have locusts. This was a big one. So there's a god, Min, M-I-N, who was the god of vegetation and harvest and all that. And apparently, ancient Egyptians would have a whole spring harvest festival dedicated to men to celebrate the year's crops and all this kind of stuff, right? It's a big party, a big thing. So the locusts coming and eating all the vegetation would not only cause a massive famine and economic disaster, but also would have totally screwed up their festival plans, right? It's putting a damper on the party as well as the worship of this god Min. And then darkness, right? This is quite obviously we're ramping up here, right? We're in the end game now, folks. So this is quite obviously an attack on Ra himself. Pretty much the highest of the Egyptian gods, the sun god, a very personal attack by God blacking out all of Egypt for 3 whole days. That was showing some real big dick energy against their number one god, right? That was pretty prominent. Yeah, so that one was heavy. That one's a big one. And then lastly, we have death of the firstborn. So ancient Egyptians believed that the pharaoh himself was also a god. Going back to Horus, they actually believe that every pharaoh was also had the spirit of Horus kind of in him. And upon death, they would then just go and hang out with Osiris or whatever, like the pharaoh inhabiting Horus's spirit or whatever, the pharaoh then would get to go. But so the pharaoh himself was a deity in their belief system. So by killing all the firstborn males in Egypt, and it says from the peasants all the way to the pharaoh himself, was signifying that the pharaoh was not a deity and he was just a guy like any other people and not as powerful of the god as the god of the Hebrews and everything. He's just really showing the pharaoh ain't shit. He ain't nobody. Everybody's gonna die. Everybody's gonna get some. And so that was and it sucked. Whatever. Obviously, but for all the firstborn males everywhere. But that was kind of, I think, the basis of that type of attack. So, yeah. So that's kind of my breakdown, my theory on where it all matches up and which one could possibly be attacking which Egyptian god in order to free the Israelite peoples. So that's that. I had one last thing I want to talk about, but I think it would take me another 10 or 15 minutes, so I'm not going to do that today. We're going to save that for some other time. I guess I was a little more long-winded than I thought I was going to be, so I don't want to keep you guys here too much longer. So I'm going to wrap it up. We will not continue this next time, but just I'll save it. I'll put it in my pocket for later. My last little theory. So that was today's episode, Fun with Plagues. I just think it's super interesting. I hope that you guys did too. Some insider information on the Egyptian gods and how everything lined up with each other. So I find it absolutely fascinating. I can't help myself from talking about this stuff, getting into it. It's all like just the theories and the deeper levels and how stuff is connected is really the stories themselves are great. I love them too. But I just, this extra element of like how things could have all connected together just to me makes it all the much better. So I love talking about it. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for hanging out. Always, thank you guys for supporting the show. And we are going to wrap it up. So hope you have a fantastic week. Cheers.